Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and I just wanted to drop in for a quick second to tell you that this podcast is really gaining popularity, and in order for us to continue growing like this, I'd love it if you could rate and review us on iTunes. Plus, I'm always excited to hear feedback and continue to improve our content based on what you want to hear. I know I'm in. Are you? How much has Julius Randle improved this year? Do the Lakers set good enough screens? How well have the Lakers absorbed Walton's offense? The only question left is, say it with me, you win. Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast. Today, I am pleased to bring on the show Pete Zayas from Laker Film Room, and a guy that I heard over on our buddy Dave Dufour's podcast last week talking Lakers. And you know, Pete, what you're doing is a little bit of a version of what I do as far as getting into the film and breaking it down. So just give us a little bit more overview of what you do over at Laker Film Room.
Yeah, I'm basically your version of an obsessed Laker fan. And so I very much stay focused on the Lakers. I'll occasionally do a scouting report for what other teams are running. But for the most part, I'm very Lakers-centric. I chart the sets that they run. I very much try to give I try to be the Laker fans' coach, kind of like how you're the basketball world's coach, in terms of fans. I try to be that middleman in between what teams are running and give a higher level of understanding of what the fans enjoy. Great.
Well, you picked the right team, because certainly whenever we do anything Lakers-centric, it always does very well, to the point where, I don't know if you've seen my Knicks Breakdown weekly show, which is a premium show for 99 cents, but I am eyeing very strongly doing a Lakers version of that in the near future, maybe sooner than later. So and part of the reason why I chose the Lakers as well is because they're fun. They're fun to watch. I went to the Knicks-Lakers game on Sunday. In fact, it was this weird thing where I went to 3 Lakers games in 1 week, and all invited. It was weird. And but the Knicks game, I have to tell you, was really kind of fun, although probably not so much from a Lakers standpoint.
It was frustrating. That was one of their more frustrating games on the defensive end. They switched a ton, and there were just way too many possessions with Clarkson or Russell on Porzingis, or closing out to Porzingis, or Mozgov trying to hedge against Derrick Rose. Just a lot of bad combinations in that game. So yeah, it was a real frustrating one for me.
Yeah, I think the Rose thing was interesting. It was kind of like a throwback MVP performance from him. And up close, you could see, he is fast with the ball, pushing it up. And it felt like it, at least being there, that he did a lot of his damage, maybe half his damage, just sort of like in transition or delayed transition. Which has to be, the big sort of not getting back, seeing the ball and seeing man, all that kind of stuff. Does that look like that from the high above?
Absolutely. That was something that, Derrick Rose in his prime, I always thought his ability to stop was really impressive. And that was something that stood out to me in early offense, transition type of play. He, a quick jump stop, and he's up with it before, the bigs back on their heels. They have a hard time recovering to that. And a guy like Mozgov, those issues are emphasized even more. And Rose just picked that apart. So yeah, that was a vintage Rose performance.
Well, let me ask you this, because you're staring at all the Lakers footage so much, and you have the same eye as I do. I've met Julius Randle. I remember actually it was in the same. I coached when I was coaching high school. We were in the same tournament as him when he was a sophomore, and I swear he was the same size as a sophomore as he is now. He was. If you go somehow in my Twitter media, there's a picture of him that I took, surreptitiously, and it was like, this guy's going to be everywhere. Nonetheless, very smart guy, very intelligent when you talk to him, but I wonder if he's a smart player. Do you feel like he picks up stuff and is sort of, intelligent as a basketball player?
He's probably my biggest source of frustration on the team. That's a really great question. I don't like playing sports psychologist and getting too deep into their heads necessarily, but there are repeatable mistakes that make your question very much valid. It's a mix of two things. There's his effort level on the defensive end is it comes and goes. He's somebody that I wish they'd use him a little more aggressively on the perimeter because he has good feet for his size, and I wish they'd hedge a little bit harder with him than they do. A lot of times he's back in the paint or he'll miss a rotation. His screen setting is very frustrating. He'll slip pretty much every screen that he goes to set. The first 10 games of the season were really encouraging for him, and he was one boost in his IQ that I saw was in transition. He stopped running people over, and he was looking to kick out to shooters, and his ability to handle the ball and get the ball up court quickly is a real asset that got guys like Young and Russell open shots. That's still happening to some extent. The Lakers obviously just got their backcourt back, but there is a great deal that makes me wonder the same question that you asked.
Right, and part of that also deals to the fact that he's a lefty, and what's interesting about lefties in the NBA who are aggressive is they've oftentimes been able to get left anyway, even though everybody in the building knows they're going left. Lamar Odom never went to his right. James Harden actually will cross back over, but he can kind of get going to the right and then he'll cross back over. I'm trying to think. There's a couple other guys I know that were just so dominant lefty, but could be effective. So the question then is we saw, I have a memory in my mind's eye of him going to his right and sort of finishing a little bit last year, or the second half of last year, the last quarter of last year. And I feel like I haven't seen that very much this year. Am I missing that? Is it there?
No, it's one thing that he's added is that he'll drive to his right and kind of give a little bump with he's gotten better at giving his bump with that off arm, and then he'll bring it back to his left hand when he does that. He's finished, I could probably count on one hand the amount of right-handed finishes that he's had. I think he's maybe had 5 to 7 somewhere in that range. That's also a source of frustration. Although for me, that's less frustrating to me than the screen setting and the defensive rotations, because those are things that if he wanted to, he could be really good at those, and he's a tank. Like you said, he was massive. I saw him a little later, I think at the Peach Jam, one of the big AAU tournaments when he was a senior, I think. And yeah, he was a grown man at that time, and he could just set massive screens, and he could, rotate. He's got great feet on defense, but so his ability to go right, it's frustrating, but it's not as frustrating as those things are for me.
Fair enough. And speaking of, it's funny, I'm going to do a breakdown on the slipping screen epidemic, which is a real problem because everybody is doing. Now, Lakers are really guilty. I mean, I love Larry Nance. He's my favorite player. But, man, he will slip those screens more than he sets them, even though every once in a while he will set a good screen. And I don't understand what happened. I mean, part of me thinks it's kind of you're being selfish because it's a way that you could kind of get the ball, right, when you slip early. But what you don't understand is that they don't work unless you set 4 really good screens in a row, right, and then you slip it. And have you noticed this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, a slip screen to me is like a screening version of a counter, right? You have your primary option, which is setting a good solid screen. And then the ability to slip it is your counter to that so that you keep the defense on the toes and allows you to keep setting those solid screens. It's like baseball. If your changeup is your main pitch, you're probably not going to be effective. We want to have a fastball in the repertoire, and the changeup is effective because the fastball. Sorry to get off to a different sport, Coach, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that's something that I notice. And the screen setting of the Lakers is it's very poor. Black sets really good screens. Mozgov sets really good screens, and beyond that, it's the pickings are pretty slim.
Well, if we're talking about slim pickings, one thing that is the opposite of that is Blue Apron. And if you haven't heard about them, this is a service that delivers fresh, high-quality ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow directions so you can cook fantastic meals in your own kitchen. For less than $10 a person, you're going to impress your wife, husband, significant other, kids, mailman, or anyone else you like to cook for by presenting to them a gorgeous plate filled with creative and savory meals. It doesn't take very long to make them at all. The portions are great, and I can tell you the crispy chicken with mashed potato and spicy collard greens was awesome. And my daughter and I had a great time making shrimp and shiitake dumplings from scratch. You can customize your menus to whatever types of food you like, or let Blue Apron surprise you. It would be a perfect gift for the upcoming holiday season, and you get your first 3 meals free by heading over to blueapron.com/CoachNick. I mean, this is like hitting a 3 at the buzzer for the win. So feel what it's like to be carried off the court by your teammates by going to blueapron.com/CoachNick and signing up now. You in? So, it's interesting. I'm kind of thinking about this right now because, the league has moved a lot towards, icing pick and rolls on the sideline or blue or down. Basically, to describe that, if you're listening, they will force the ball handler away from the screen down toward the baseline, and then the guy guarding the screener will sink down near the block or whatever to contain. It's Thibodeau's sort of invention, although the Bulls did it actually. I actually asked Scottie Pippen about it because I had said, supposedly, accidentally, you guys discovered that this was a great way to defend it. And he looked at me and goes, it wasn't an accident. And I was like, okay. Nonetheless, but the point being that I'm starting to wonder, can you slip an ice defense and somehow destroy it? I guess you can't slip down because you run right into your man. But I wonder, is there anything there? Do you see anything in your head?
Yeah. You could pop. Yeah, you could. It's a way you could pop a little bit quicker. If the big is sunk down into the lane, and he's hanging back. Say you've got a guard that you really have to respect the drive against. You can, fake setting that and then slip it out, to the wing or so as that guard dribble drags to create the space. But in terms of slipping it into the paint, no, that's not going to be particularly effective.
Right, that doesn't work. But either way, I got to do a breakdown. It's just going to be like a montage of guys just like getting kind of close. Maybe they touch them on the shoulder and then they kind of go, and it's just it's not right. We need to clean that up, and we need to do it in a hurry because what we're missing a lot of is, and a lot of times when you see like the Warriors offense, which is basically a sort of a conduit of what the Lakers are doing to some degree, is they won't screen and then cut to the hoop sometimes. And I feel like it's that cutting to the basket that just sucks the defense in, and you have to, it's like you just have to do it, you're not going to get the ball. And that's the other thing. It's one of those sort of dirty lunch pail things, I guess, in some way. And I feel like the Lakers also could suffer from that as well. It's sort of, not getting enough sort of cutting to the basket.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that when we talk about screens, we tend to, overemphasize ball screens. But just as important is the ability to set a decent screen on the weak side. And that's something that, the Warriors are consistently a bottom 2, bottom 3 team in the amount of ball screens that they run per year. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because they're getting such great action on the weak side. They're actually making contact on those screens. Whereas with a young team like the Lakers, one of the difficulties is getting those guys to see the value in setting it, right? It may be a part of the offense in terms of how the coach has drawn it up. But if the guys aren't making contact and sprinting to screen and getting a wide base, making contact, et cetera, curling tight off of it, it's not going to create an open look. And so one of Luke Walton's challenges is getting them to understand the value of that and how that's going to make their lives easier.
Absolutely, and and things were moving along nicely. I think they were 10-10 at some point, and competing. Is this only the record's kind of gone the other way for a little while? Is this only about injuries?
No, that's a big part of it, and I think they got a little bit discouraged as a result of the injuries. The defensive end is what's really hurting them right now. They're either I think they're 27th in defensive rating, which jumped up from 30th just a couple days ago. They've been really bad over this losing streak. Talked a little bit about the Knicks game where they switched a ton. That is pretty par for the course with them. I think that they overswitch and get themselves into trouble. It's a confluence of factors. There's young guys who don't tend to be the best on the defensive end, a bit of discouragement from the injuries, and it's probably my biggest gripe with Luke is the consistent switching. I'm a big Luke Walton fan, don't get me wrong, but that's my biggest gripe is I think they're switching unnecessarily, and I'd like to see more hedge and recover type of situations.
Well, the next video I can do after the epidemic of slipping screens is switching, and I think you're right, and we could blame Steve Kerr or whoever decided to do it this way because there are, I would say, I don't know, maybe, what would you say, 30% of those are simply, they didn't have to switch. It could have been a little tiny bit of effort, and they could stay with their man, kind of sidestep, get in there, but instead it's just like, boom, we're going to switch. And it just, the NBA teams are good at exploiting that. It might take them a little bit longer. Like the Spurs would be like, as soon as it's there, they're going to get the ball to the guy on the mismatch right away. Like they're not going to waste any time. And I feel like the younger teams and the teams that are worse at that see the mismatch, but it might take them another 6 seconds to get it to them. And then what you get into a problem with, I think, is that now the shot clock is running down. They don't have a lot of time to do anything with it. But yeah, I don't understand. Do you, like, how long have you been really looking at the NBA? Can you trace this sort of the switching thing to any, ground zero?
I think that my instinct is to say the introduction of the stretch four is when we start. I think that there might be a parallel between the two, with the idea in mind of there are fewer bigs who can exploit a big-small mismatch down low on a consistent basis. Oh. I think maybe even going further back than that is the 2001 zone defense changes that allowed differences on the weak side in terms of what defenses could do, which kind of de-emphasized the post a bit. I like you said, I think it's gone too far in that direction, but I would say that the more similarity 1 through 4 in the size of players and the skill sets of players. That's my instinct, although I couldn't say that definitively.
But what I'm hearing also is what you're saying is it's less about the on-ball defenses, that it's more about what they could do to help on the weak side with the loosening up of the man-to-man rules. And that's interesting. I would think that might be 30% of it, and like maybe 70% is that there are no good post people anymore, really. And that's really frustrating to me. I don't know if I've said this before in a podcast, but for instance, Kevin McHale shot 55% from the field, 56% from the field, and for his career. Some of those are putbacks, but he wasn't shooting from outside. Those are all post-ups pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so what that tells you is that I'm sure his points per possession was 1.1 or 1.2, really good. And meanwhile, now the top post players' efficiency is probably below 1. And now the analytics guys are saying, well, it's not a good shot anymore. We shouldn't be posting up because it's not efficient. Meanwhile, what I think we have is guys. I mean, Blake Griffin. Did you watch the Clippers games at all?
Yeah.
Or actually, all you have to do is follow my Twitter account because I'll vine most of his post ups. He does things that are so infuriatingly bad, random, horrible, twisting, whatever, and yet he also is usually among the leaders in post-up efficiency. So anyway, I would have to imagine that's got to be part of it, is that you get a small on a big, he's just going to take him to the post, and now it's not, people don't do that as much anymore.
For sure, and again with the weak side component, you're able to front or three-quarter deny a little more than they used to. We can get certainly into great philosophical conversation regarding the post. I think that there's a snowball effect, right? I think that the weak side rule changes diminish the effectiveness of the post a bit, and I think as a result of that, post play began to be taught less. If you look back, even at guys like Olajuwon or Patrick Ewing, they scored more in their rookie year in the NBA than they did in college. And that's where you have that zone versus man-to-man change, right? So when they came into the league, it was the old school man-to-man. You had to be, for your younger fans, you had to be within arm's length of your man on the weak side, or you had to hard double, right? And so I think there's some component of that. I also think guys who have had really wonderful footwork, guys like Pau Gasol, I think his fundamentals match up well with guys from bygone eras, but they haven't been able to get up the volume of shots to be, Pau Gasol maybe in the 80s might be a 25-point per game guy as opposed to the 20-point per game guy he was at his peak,
That's actually, again, very right. It reminds me of like switching from aluminum to wood bats, to go back to baseball, although the opposite, because right. It's harder to hit with the wood bats. But nonetheless, that's interesting. Yes, it's true. Certainly, without the zone, it was easier to post up. But certainly what we've seen with like the Warriors is they just use the post up as a position to facilitate from, which is a lot like it's exactly how the triangle worked for the Bulls. I mean, they had Luke Longley and Bill Cartwright and those guys, every once in a while they would do a post move and try and score, but it was always to sort of keep the offense going, draw the attention down there. And I think that's what's nice about what Kerr is doing, and then sort of Walton as an extension, is that they're kind of bringing a lot of those sort of things back. Another video I have to do is on the Knicks. They're still running the pure triangle, 10 times a game. In fact, the Lakers game was interesting because during crunch time, they turn to the triangle. They don't run it the whole game, but when they need a really important score, they run the triangle, which sort of doesn't make any sense to me.
Was that their corner series? I thought I caught some Porzingis running off of some back screen action on the corner series.
Twice. They did it like twice in a row. It was like, maybe 10 minutes to go in the fourth. I mean, this is all sort of, in the midst of the craziness of watching it live. But it was around, something like that. And, which is just fascinating to me because, here's an offense that everyone's yelling at. The players don't even seem to like it that much. And yet they trust it enough to run it when, the more important times of the game. It's just very strange. I trust you were watching the Lakers back when they were running the triangle. Was that safe to say?
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, okay, let's trace your Laker, fandom. Wow, at what point did you become or watching with a critical eye, like things you'd recognize in the court?
With the critical eye, I was as young as I could see anything with a critical eye. Really, I was a short point guard in high school who made up for it by being slow. And I was an end of the bench guy that never played, and I was really fascinated by the X's and O's of the game, and so that was kind of my indoctrination into that world. So I'd say, when was that? Mid '90s. My teenage years were with those Van Exel, Ceballos, Eddie Jones teams. So
nice.
About then is when I started looking at the game that way.
And then, then let's trace a little bit more of your lineage because you certainly have a really good grasp of what's going on. How else did you amass your knowledge?
I coached in high school for a bit. You and I actually coached in the same league, not at the same time, but for a bit in the West Valley League in LA. And
did you coach at Cleveland?
I did. I helped out a buddy of mine. At Cleveland. I was an assistant there.
So did we communicate a year ago about this or something on Twitter?
It was under a different handle, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's really weird. I didn't. Okay, so of course, yes. I don't think I realized that was you.
Yeah, I'm that guy. Yeah. So,
wow. Okay. Yes. So you coached at Cleveland, which, by the way, is where Nick Young played basketball. I coached against Nick Young when he was at Cleveland. And as an assistant, so you were at Cleveland. Okay, right. Now, was I there at Birmingham at the same time?
No. This was last year, and I was an assistant coach for a friend. I had a head coach gig in LA at a smaller school for about 4 years, and I coached a little bit of AAU ball. But I'm mostly an obsessed fan that has some lower level coaching experience rather than the other way around.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's exciting. When you were a head coach, what did you run on offense?
I was a fan of Vance Wahlberg's dribble drive motion offense. That was, we used a lot of floor space. Now, in the group of kids that I worked with, of the 20 or so that I had between JV and varsity, I think 5 of them had played organized basketball before. So in terms of what you can run, the level of sophistication, like something like horns, we ran horns, and that was something that they could get. I pressured a lot on defense. I tried to get as few half-court set plays as I could because that's when we and everyone else in our league, to be frank, got in trouble. So we tried to have a very fast-paced game, 2-2-1, full-court press type stuff. But yeah, Vance Wahlberg, horns, that type of stuff.
It's funny. It's funny. I was shooting something on court a month or two ago, and one of my old players brought one of his friends who played at Cleveland when I was coaching. And just reminded me of a hilarious story where we were down. We were home and we were down by 3. The game was over with 10 seconds to go. They get the ball back, and instead of inbound, all I have to do is inbound the ball at half court. We have to foul whatever we're gonna do, right? The dude shoots the ball from out of bounds, just shoots it before the referee kind of collected it and whatever. And the referee had no choice but to call a delay of game, technical foul. Oh wait, that was what it was? No, oh crap! I gotta call my guy. It was something like that. It was the only way we win is they get a technical foul. We shoot the free throw. Maybe we get the ball back, but it was all the way a full court. We had we shot a 3 from 75 feet to tie it. whatever it was insane. I think that's what happened. I know we hit a three-quarter court shot. Did that win it? Or did we win in overtime? I can't remember, but that Cleveland will always be a fun. And I remember all the games at Cleveland were insane like that. And every time the coach and I would see each other, we'd be like, please, just have a regular game where we can just not have to have a heart attack.
Yeah, those are fun. I had a school where they were in our league, so we played them twice a year. We played them 6 times, and 5 of them went to at least overtime, and 3 of those went to double overtime. And the other one was like a 3-point game in regulation. And we split them like 3-3 each. And yeah, those are fun. They take a couple years off of your life eventually, but it was some beautiful memories.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep talking about the Lakers a little bit, because what are some things that you're seeing that you like about what they're doing offensively that seems to have turned this thing around? Even if you want to compare and contrast last year, or just what are they getting that's working for them so well?
I would say the biggest difference from last year is that they have an early offense scheme. They run very intentional lanes, and they have intentional actions off of that. You talked about the post up. One of the things they'll do is a early offense post up and then run a split cut off of that. Mm-hmm. Which is something that a lot of the league does. They a lot of drag screens and step up screens in transition. They've got the wings filling lanes, getting deep corner as soon as possible. Whereas last year it was really just kind of 5 guys running up court, and where they ended up, and they would run set plays pretty much every time down last year. Whereas this year they have early offense principles that guys just kind of react off of, like the split cuts, things like that. And so they're running fewer possessions this year they're running fewer plays. They actually have a pretty extensive playbook. They've incorporated a lot of Spurs motion. They do a lot of from the Spurs zipper series. They've done a lot of action off of that. They still run floppy, which they ran last year. They run with Russell out. They've run more horns than they did prior to that. Let's see what else. They stolen a couple things from Golden State. What I would say is, I said this the other day, they run about 20% of 90% of their offense, meaning that they have I chart their plays, and and obviously as an outsider, I can't say that I know every single play and every single name that they run, but by the actions I've identified, it's about 30 different sets that they run, and they don't run many of them with any particular degree of sophistication at this point. Like, none of them are very good. Mm-hmm. But I think Walton feels a good degree of job security, and I think he's probably throwing all of the playbook at them, or most of it, right now, with the idea that they can build on all of it over the course of time. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing from them.
Yeah, it's great to hear and to see that as well. That's what's making it fun. It's a little bit faster paced, and you don't have to sit there staring at the bench the whole time to see what the play is, which is what they do in Dallas. And I respect Carlisle to the nth degree, but man, I would never want to play in a system where I have to constantly be looking back at the bench to call a play. And to me, what Kerr is doing and what Walton is doing is the essence of the triangle offense is the automatics, right? You get a couple players in certain positions and the ball goes somewhere, then you kind of can break into an action and you all know what's going on. And after enough time of doing it, you can then break into something different out of that, but everyone kind of keeps the mindset because there's this notion of rhythm and movement that you've been working on for so long, in detail-oriented. It doesn't seem to me there shouldn't be any other way to play the game, in my mind. It seems like and I think it's also very telling, and you probably remember this as well, is when they got rid of Phil the first time and they were in the wilderness for a couple of years with Rudy Tomjanovich, and they demanded, I felt like the players said they wanted Phil back. They wanted to be able to play in a structure that let them, know where everyone is and moving at the same time, whatever, as opposed to a very pro-set traditional Tomjanovich offense. And I think once you play in it, you never want anything else. I think that's sort of what the point of it is.
Yeah, and I think the young players are experiencing something similar. With one thing that I've noticed from a lot of the quotes is they're taking a lot of responsibility for this losing streak. I think I see them. There's a level of engagement in running the offense that really wasn't there under. Byron Scott was more of that Tomjanovich type of ilk, right, where you run set plays, you're looking back at the bench, and I'm seeing growth. That I do attribute to that whole structured environment that, Triangle, Princeton back in the day, all of those, those types of offenses are able to provide.
Yeah. And if you see, like, he calls a play off a timeout or a stoppage play every time.
Right.
And that's okay. Every time you have a chance to just sort of everyone's, not moving for a second, okay, you'll call a play. And then every time else, that's probably what Luke said to them. He goes, okay, I'm going to give you free reign to do these actions. You just got to give me those probably, 12 a game when there's a stoppage. No, it's probably more than 12, but maybe 20 a game, which is probably out of the, let's see. You might have 20 of those in the game right after a whistle or whatever. Then you have 20 transition possessions. And out of that, you're going to have maybe 60 more that are just sort of regular, half court, whatever. So he's probably saying, I'll give you like 50, 60 possessions. You got to give me the 20. I think that's fair. He probably on defense, it's what Phil would do is Phil would say, okay, give me like 12 really good possessions of defense where you deny this one pass and everything else just be professional and plays, whatever you can do. And they win by 7 to 8 points, right? Those 12 possessions would yield 3 or 4 points and they would win. I think it's how you got to do it at the pro level.
For sure. The one caveat I would throw on top of that is that with the current Laker team, telling them to be a professional means something different than it did for the older veteran Laker teams. Like these are kids. Several of them can't legally buy a beer, mm-hmm. And so they're just now learning what does that even mean to be a professional,
Yeah.
That's an additional challenge that Luke faces that, Phil kind of had built-in professionals on his roster, whereas Luke doesn't.
Now, and to be fair for Byron Scott, Luke has probably a little bit less of an issue with that this year because they did have a whole year to kind of go through it. But I would think that it would be a bad check mark on a coaching assessment if you have a player that says in public, no less, I have no idea what my coach wants or what I'm supposed to do, right? Right. And I feel like Byron Scott would have said, "Well, I'm not just going to spoon feed him. He's going to have to figure it out, whatever." And so I would argue, I suppose, in some way. I'm not defending Byron Scott by any means, but I guess I'd argue in some respects, like that kind of tough love, you want to call it, must be helping Luke now. I'd imagine.
I think what it's provided, I am not a Byron Scott fan, but I will be diplomatic. I think what it's provided is they've gone from an environment that they really disliked to one that they really enjoyed. And so it's kind of like the hope for the future, even if you don't know what it's going to be, is better than a miserable present. And I think they were really miserable in the environment that they were in. And so they had something called the Breakfast Club over the course of the summer where all of the young guys would show up at 6 a.m. and they had pretty much perfect attendance throughout the summer. They were kind of banging the door down to get to work with the new coach. I do think that there is value in Byron Scott's approach. I don't think it's completely bereft of that. I also think there's value in having guys like Hibbert and an older Kobe, Meta World Peace. That's why he's on the roster this year. I think having guys who are pros, I think that's also a different level of teaching that from the veterans on the end of the bench. So while I wouldn't say that it's valueless, I think that there was a collective sigh of relief from the young guys that they're benefiting from.
For sure. And I also think that it's important to understand from any coaching level that, you could take the approach of you're supposed to know this stuff, you're supposed to be professional, we expect this of you, da-da-da-da, and versus what Luke has done, which is created an environment where they actually enjoy doing that, and he'll help them to get where they need to go, and then in return they'll enjoy doing it. And I feel like what we've seen, and I talked about this in the podcast before, but we'll talk about it again, is there's a certain generation of coaches, Sam Mitchell, Byron Scott, probably even like D'Antoni's in that same realm. And you could argue that Popovich would be too. Whereas, the Sam Mitchell thing that I use a lot is he expressed so much frustration with the young players for not knowing like the basic fundamentals that he would have known coming out of college. And you know how that works. When you work with young players even, and they can sense the frustration that you're giving them because you don't know something, you're not going to get through. And it's going to make them resent anything you might want to end up teaching them eventually.
Yeah, it becomes, it becomes a snowball effect where they start to resent you and they tune you out, so you become more frustrated with them, and that accumulates over the course of a year to where a point where the relationship really becomes irredeemable at that point.
And like a real big tip for anybody who might be taking over a program anytime, and because I made this huge mistake. Well, here's what they don't do: you can learn X's and O's, you can learn communication skills and motivation, all that stuff. But what they need to do is have some sort of book on how to take over a program when someone else leaves. And then there's got to be certain ways. If that person left and didn't say anything to anybody, okay, that's what you have to, there's a certain information, which is what happened to me. And then if they left, but it was, a smoother transition, then that's something else. But one thing I would say is don't ever, what happened? I had seniors on my first team, and they didn't really know how to pass.
Yeah.
And I didn't really say, what's wrong with you, or why is it your problem? I said, didn't your coach teach you any of this stuff? And I probably said that a few times. And what I didn't appreciate was the coach was popular before he left, abandoning them. And so me, I'm the stepdad who is,
right.
Talking shit about the dad. And I wouldn't do that again. I think that would be a safe thing. If I had to do one thing over, I wouldn't have criticized the old coach like that. But by the way, guess what I was expressing? My frustration for them not knowing. Instead of saying, "Oh, this is amazing. We're going to show you some really cool stuff that your whole world is going to open up." And that should be the way you treat all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a difference in youth basketball versus when we were growing up. I would say that there's no middle class, to put it in economic terms. And what I mean by that is that your average high school ball player who's not going to play in Division I college or not going to make it to the NBA, I think they get less basketball development from those kindergarten through high school years. Leading into high school, I should say, than probably we did at our age. But the kids who are supreme athletes, who are really fantastic athletes, they get identified very early, and then they get this just remarkable education of, all of the skills trainers that are out there, all of the resources that are available. So they're able to get just this amazing education, whereas there's not as much in place anymore in the youth basketball realm to just teach your average kid that wants to play high school basketball and use that. So I had many moments very similar to yours, where either I articulated it or I said in my head, wait, why don't you know this? What happened? How do you not understand this? Where it's so intuitive to me, and I had to realize that, no, they weren't, and that's not their fault.
I know.
That's the fault of how they were brought through the basketball system.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I prided myself every year we always had that one kid that would trip over the line when he walked in the gym and really couldn't even do anything out there. And then we would really work with him, and by the middle of his sophomore year, he'd be one of our best players. And guess what? The next guy would walk in the gym who was I'm never going to make this team. I can't do it. I would see something. There was something about him. He was playing. He just wanted to play hard. He was eager and whatever. And I said, "Look, see that guy over there?" And he's like, "Yeah, that was you a year and a half ago." And then they'd be like, they wouldn't even believe me. And then we work with them, and they would, there was nothing better than that, because you're right. The guys that are actually really good and have that talent, they're going to get it quickly. You're going to be able to get some really amazing things with them. But there is something about getting in there when they're earnest and when they really want to do it. I've had the opposite where, I've worked with kids, in ninth grade who, they have no jump shot, and I would show them the form, and they would shoot one shot. It would fly off the rim, and they'd say, "See, it doesn't work."
Right. Yes.
And it would be there's only so much time you have to deal with when you start off that way. And but when you get the guys who are eager, who really want to, and also this at the high school level, you can't have 5 ball stars. It doesn't work. You can't have 5. You could do it 3 maybe, and then you have the other 2 guys who are really eager. They play up. They're smart. You can teach them how to play the way you want them to play. I mean, that's the real secret sauce, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that. On the high school level, you're the GM to some extent. You're the head coach. You're the trainer. There's so many different roles that you're wearing within that you have to identify very early on. Like you said, that kid who says, "Oh, well, see, it didn't work." Your time as the head coach is also really valuable, and every one-on-one moment that you spend with one kid is time that you're not spending with the others, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to become judicious in how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. Obviously, you have the team to take care of, but then that one-on-one time that, hey, let's stay after practice and work on that. Is that going to be 2 hours that are going to bear fruit down the line, or is it going to be the kid that's
Right.
2 jump shots in, goes, forget about it. So.
Well, speaking of those kind of kids, do you have the same kind of love for Larry Nance that I do?
Well, I think your love exceeds mine. I don't think now, don't get me wrong. I love Nance. I'm a huge fan. I know he has a special place in your heart, Coach. But yeah, he sets he's that glue guy, that energy guy. There are a dozen cliches for the type of player that Nance is. He's so smart. He's one of maybe 3 good passers on the Lakers. Mm-hmm. He out of the short roll, which is when a defense is hard hedging and you don't want your big to roll all the way to the basket. You want him to, get to about the free throw line or so, and to create like a 4-on-3 scenario. I think Draymond gets a ton of assists off of this, right? Nance is great in those scenarios, and he's gotten Randle a bunch of easy buckets, Tarek Black a bunch of easy buckets. My biggest complaint with him is that he's going to realize one of these days how good he is. And he's going to become a more aggressive player. That's probably, he has at least one what I call record scratch per game where he should totally take that shot, and he's totally capable of taking that shot, but he doesn't take that shot. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm a huge Nance fan. I think he's a 25 to 30 minute player on a really good team.
Yeah, and he does so many little things that do not. And I did a video on this just because I wanted to expose people to the things that you're never going to really notice. Like there's actually, you probably know, there's one play they have, and I haven't seen it run recently, where he's on the elbow. And I think it's like a Horns-ish thing where they throw the ball to the other elbow, and he claps really hard like he wants the ball, but it's not really supposed to go to him because then they reverse it and he gets a backdoor cut or something like that, right? And it's
they said back screen for him, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like he knows that if he could get his man inching up a little bit higher towards him while he's clapping really loud for the ball, then he'll get open for the backdoor. That kind of stuff, like that, when I saw that stuff happening like last year, I'm like, he's the best player on the team. Like he would do those things. He'd get a deflection and he would sprint down the court and he'd finish on the bat, whatever, on a break, way over the rim. And I'm like, these are the things that are going to win you games, throughout his career. Which also begs to the question, like, how does a guy have an NBA father? Although we don't know the relationship he had with his father, but he has an NBA father and doesn't have a jump shot. How is that possible?
That's a great question. I hadn't pondered that. His form doesn't, it's not great, but it's not awful. And I feel like he passes up a ton of shots that he should be taking. I also don't think that one little complaint I have for him, I don't think he has a great feel for popping into the correct space. So I think he shoots more contested shots than he needs to, whereas the defender's closer to close out on him. That's just a very small observation. But yeah, he's a guy where a quality jump shot unlocks a lot of things for him.
Yeah, and it's not a good form. It's a shot put. It's too low for him. And I'm not against saying that any kind of form could be replicable and he can get consistent with it, but there's just, it's too low. He doesn't get the kind of, I gotta look at it more frame by frame, but it's just weird that he wouldn't have had a guy come in when he was 9 or
Sure.
10 and really just built a nice jump shot for him. And it's probably too late. I don't know. Because he's older as it is anyway. He's probably, 24?
Yeah.
So it's not going to I don't think he's going to rebuild his mechanics. But yeah, that's a real issue. And as they get better, he's going to get more opportunity, more shots because they're going to have to be worried about the other players. And it's that could very well be the thing that elevates them is if he can finally do that. And by the way, his old man didn't have a great form on his jump shot, but he can nail it. And he needs to get to that point to make them that real competitive team.
Yeah, for sure. No, he's a really valuable contributor to what they can do going forward, but he needs to provide. I have the greatest respect for the little things for sure, but he needs to provide a couple more of those big things, like the ability to knock down a jumper and score in order for him to really solidify his spot in the rotation,
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that. He seems to have a good work ethic, and I suspect he will continue to improve. But you're right about the notion of him believing. It kind of reminds me of Ronnie Turiaf, who, if he ever really had figured out how good he could be in that very same manner, he wasn't sort of mean enough in a way. He wasn't, and I don't want to say selfish enough, but there were times when Turiaf would give the ball up too easily or whatever when he could have just dominated sometimes. and maybe Nance will figure that out a little bit better, and really, that could be the key here. But certainly, it's going to be fun while we go through it. I can tell you that, and I can't thank enough, Coach, for coming on the show with us and breaking some stuff down. We should do some more of this.
Yeah, I had a blast, Coach. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe we'll even try and do something video-wise where we can, for the YouTube channel, do some sort of Skype call and have footage and whatever. That could be fun too.
That'd be awesome, yeah, because we all see different things when we look at the same thing. So
absolutely, we do. So, well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And let's tell everybody, how they find you. The Laker Film Room is your YouTube channel. Where else?
Yeah, that my Twitter, also at Laker Film Room. Just started a podcast, Laker Film Room Podcast, and have a website coming out soon. So.
Terrific. Well, again, thanks for coming on the show. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Pete?
I'm in, Coach.